Hello, welcome to Pizza Talk on Pizza Quest. And I'm Peter Reinhardt. I am here with Karen Getz, who is coming to us from Maine, right? You're up in Maine, and you are the
Me.
creator of one of my favorite new products, Maine Crisps. And that's what we're going to talk about today. We usually talk about pizza, but Karen, I was so excited about what you're doing in Maine with buckwheat in particular, which I think is kind of very cool. I think it's kind of the next big category, grain category. Everyone's into ancient grains, which it doesn't get much more ancient than buckwheat, frankly. But they're also into gluten free. They're into all sorts of issues that that have been, let's say, just coming to the surface or underdeveloped. And I think buckwheat is one of those hidden gems that's so much a part of the American agricultural scene, but hasn't been really fully exploited as a commerce product. And that's where I'm very excited about what you're doing. So would you do me a favor and tell everybody about a little bit of your journey, how you got into working with buckwheat, and what led to these wonderful crackers? I've got 4 different samples here, and we're going to be tasting them along the way once we get into it.
Great, great. Well, thank you for having me, Peter. I appreciate it, and happy to talk about all things crisp and buckwheat. And my husband and I both kind of stumbled into buckwheat. We loved just going to Japanese restaurants and eating udon noodles. And it was my mom who had bought us a book on soba noodles. She thought we would love soba noodles, and we were just fascinated when we read it and read all about buckwheat that we ended up taking a trip to Japan and eating soba noodles all across the countryside, and just really getting to know the different varieties of buckwheat and tasting. So
There really is a difference. There's buckwheat, but then there's buckwheats. So there's different strains or
there's different
types.
strains of it. There's different, milling techniques for it. So if you're making soba noodles, you want a finer buckwheat for, just that really delicate handmade soba noodle. But anyway, after that, that was in the early 2000s, and when we had. After that, we dairy farmed. So we, still ate buckwheat noodles and enjoyed eating buckwheat, but we had a dairy farm and started making cheese. And one of the things that in the cheese business was, you put all this time into making cheese was, what to pair with. So one thing that led to another, and I typically pair with fruit, because a lot of times the crackers were either bland and pasty, or they had too much flavor that they overwhelmed the cheese and didn't pair nicely. So we did that for many years. And then I worked as a buyer for a food co-op where I got to know ingredients. And this was in like 2011, 2012, when gluten-free was really starting to take off. And so I was constantly reading the ingredients as a buyer, tasting product. And what I had noticed was, gluten-free used a lot of the same ingredients. So rice flours and starches and stuff. So I started doing bakings with alternative grains and demos for the food co-op, and introducing people to amaranth and quinoa flour, and buckwheat flour was one of them. And repeatedly, people would tell me they didn't like buckwheat, and they've had it in pancakes, and that was it. And so, I had cookies, I had granola bars, I had pancake recipe, and they were surprised that, like, wait, this doesn't taste like the heavy buckwheat that they traditionally had. So this has been a journey. And then a few years later, my husband's job was bringing us to Maine, and I wasn't sure what I wanted to do when I moved to Maine. And we were up in Aroostook County, which is Maine's northernmost county. And
way up and
top of way Maine. Up there. Yeah. So our buckwheat supplier is a 4-hour drive north.
But wait a minute, let me go backtrack. So this whole time that you were making cheese and everything, you weren't living in Maine at that time. You were living somewhere else.
No, we were in Vermont at that time.
Ah, okay.
Yep. But you have these experiences that sort of like you remember things and think about
Yeah.
it. And so it was on, that trip that I, saw the Bouchard farm and, there are fields and fields of buckwheat and it just sort of clicked like, wait a minute, buckwheat grows here.
So
This is,
that's what I was wondering, when kind of the buckwheat light flashed, because it wasn't until you moved to Maine and saw that buckwheat
yes,
was plentiful up there that you kind of
yes.
connected the dots on this.
Yes. And then I'm like, okay, I told him, I know what I want to do. I want to start a specialty food business. I want to make something with buckwheat and wild blueberries, but I didn't know what. So, so at least, that was the idea. And then we moved and I started experimenting and yep.
Wild
That was my
blueberry,
first
yep.
flavor.
So wild blueberry walnuts, or was that like your first crisp then in a sense?
That was the first crisp, and I chose wild blueberries, for their health properties, but also because they have been, they're native to Maine. They have been growing in Maine for over 10,000 years.
Yeah.
Buckwheat's been cultivated for over 8,000 years. So we use a special strain of buckwheat that came from Canada originally. They sometimes refer to it as Canadian buckwheat or Acadian buckwheat, but it is Tartary buckwheat, which is,
Tartary. So that's the specific, those are making note of this Tartary buckwheat is the
yep.
specific strain. Most people I think associate Maine and blueberries, but I don't think that if you ask the average American if they associate buckwheat in Maine, they probably don't know that unless they've
Right,
lived up there. Um,
right,
and
right.
and I want to mention that one of the reasons why I really wanted to have this conversation with you is that even though we track mostly stories that have to do with pizza or that are related to pizza,
Mhm.
we also Pizza Quest, our site and our whole mission is really to celebrate artisanship wherever we find it, not just in the world of pizza. Pizza is just sort of the leading edge of that story for us. And I think what you're doing and what you sort of kind of ended up evolving into as you moved into Maine was, again, applying your sense of craft and artisanship and farming and everything else to a very specific product that maybe nobody else was, had seen what you were seeing about how it could be turned into something and into a viable product and maybe grown into a large business. So I really wanted to hear more about that, because that's really the quest. I mean, for all of us,
Yeah.
whether it's pizza that's leading us, or cheese or anything else, or buckwheat, it's leading us to fulfill a vision that we have, and that's why I'm excited about what you're doing.
Sure, sure. Well, and having that farming background and understanding that connection between, the land and the farmer and farmers getting a fair price for their crop. I mean, that was one of the drivers. Like, I want to see how much local I can use in the product that I'm going to make and differentiate it in the market that way. Because, once I started making it, it became, the challenge was to make it without the traditional gluten-free ingredients. And
Mhm.
buckwheat is flavorful and it grows really well in cold climates. So for Maine, it's a perfect crop
Yeah.
and it can do well in rich soils. It can do well in poor soils. So, it's sometimes used to help bring soils back a bit as what they call like a green manure, and then just get
Mhm.
mowed and redone. But it's that was a driver. Like, what can I use local? How can I, help to, in the farm economy, how can I help to pay a fair price, plus bringing something to the consumer that is tasty, delicious, healthy, that they're going to love.
I think most of us who say have a Eastern European heritage, like my part of my
Mhm.
family comes from Russia and that area, we know buckwheat as kasha,
Mhm. Mhm.
and kasha and buckwheat groats and heavy cereals and a grain, basically a cooked grain. Um, but we don't think of it as sort of just a light flour that can be used for other things. First of all, what does buckwheat look like when it's growing? Is it a grass like wheat? Does it put out heads and have seeds, or how's it harvested?
Sure. It's not related to wheat at all. So it is not in the wheat family. It just has that unfortunate name with wheat in it,
Yeah.
but it's actually related to rhubarb.
Oh,
And
oh,
a Tartary buckwheat it has these large, almost triangular shaped leaves. and then it flowers and the little seeds. So the Tartary buckwheat has very tiny seeds that are almost like little triangles themselves. And you notice that in buckwheat groats for like the Japanese buckwheat.
Is that, and is a groat another name for seed, or is that a part of a seed?
That's the groat is like the inside of the seed that you eat. Yeah.
Okay, so
like
so when it's
pascha is
harvested,
the toasted groats.
so when the buckwheat's harvested, they have to get rid of the outside. Is that a hard shell that has to be broken
Yes.
off?
That is it. So what I think where a lot of people that don't like buckwheat, they've had buckwheat that's been milled with the hard shell, and that's included in the flour, which makes it very gritty, very heavy. So to have a lighter flour, like the Bouchard farm, they crack the outer hull, blow out the seed, and then they mill the interior seed, and that gives you a lighter buckwheat.
Interesting, because I've seen buckwheat sold as dark buckwheat and light buckwheat, and now
Yes.
this is the first time I'm understanding why. So the outside is edible, but it's just that it's harsher, it's harder and more
Yes, it's going to
fibrous
be more
probably.
grainy, it's going to be heavy, and that's where people like within pancakes, that they're like, oh, buckwheat pancakes are so heavy and dense and gritty and
Yeah. But is the inside, the kernel or the groat, is that comparable to, say, the endosperm of wheat? Is it mostly starch, or is there protein and any other kind of fiber or germ in there?
yeah, I mean, it does have fiber, it does have iron, it does have protein to it as well.
So it's nutritious.
So
But
it is still nutritious. Yeah,
yeah.
absolutely.
Okay, so now we got sort of the essence of the buckwheat. So it grows in the fields. Does it grow like it's a flowering, like I said, like a grass, or does it grow more like a bushy plant that you have to shake the seeds from?
Well, kind of in between. So it grows, almost like, let's see, describe it, maybe up to 1.5 feet tall, and then it has these big leaves and then flowers, but it's not bushy, but it's not thin like a grass.
Okay, so it's very different from wheat. Buckwheat
Yes.
could also be called not wheat.
Not wheat, right?
Not wheat.
Right.
Right.
Exactly.
So we're in a whole different realm. And then, and again, we associated here, I think Americans associate buckwheat as like a Russian or Eastern European grain, but really it's plentiful in the United States, and there's different strains from what I'm hearing.
Right, correct. There's a lot of the common buckwheat grown. There's a few more farmers here in Maine that also grow the Japanese buckwheat. And those are the 3 strains that I'm familiar with.
And the Japanese buckwheat's the one that they would make soba noodles from?
Correct.
In Japan. But can you make soba noodles from the Tartary buckwheat that you're using?
I haven't. The interesting thing about the Tartary buckwheat is it turns yellow when you add water to it. So my aprons always look like somebody had taken a yellow Sharpie highlighter
Really?
from the dry batter. And it's amazing that it's not the most appetizing color, but it's amazing that once it's baked, it bakes into this beautiful brown.
Is it yellow like semolina or like cornmeal, or yellow like more like day glow?
No, it's highlighter yellow when you
Highlighter yellow. So
it doesn't look yellow like cornmeal or semolina, but when you add water,
it's not golden, it's yellow.
It's yellow. And when you add wild blueberries to it, it's yellow green. It's not the most attractive.
Does that show up in these crisps then? Do you see any of the color in the crisp?
No, not
So,
after
of course,
it's baked.
this is pretty dark. The crisp itself is dark, but that's from being toasted, right?
That's from being toasted. So they're actually made they're loaves of bread first. They start out as a loaf of bread, and then they get sliced and put onto a sheet pans and then rebaked until they're crisp.
Kind of like biscotti.
Kind of like biscotti, absolutely.
Or Melba toast. That's
or Melba toast,
do a wheat variation of it, which is what this reminds me of. These crisps remind me so much of little Melba toast, squares. And yet, and my wife, who had tasted her first Maine crisp last night, she's never tasted them before, and then she said, "What are they like?" And I said, "Well, they're kind of like Melba toast." And she took a bite and she said, "They're way better than Melba toast. I like this a lot more." And so and because it does, it kind of like, and I'm going to bite into this one here. I've got the blueberry. This is blueberry walnut. So it crisps off. It snaps off really easy, and it crackles in your mouth. It crumbles in your mouth. You're not fighting it like you do with Melba toast, which has a lot of
Right,
gluten and protein. So this is
right.
much flakier.
Much flakier. And that's what I like about it. And my only theory is, it's gluten-free. It wants to fall apart. And the challenge is to keep it together so that it's not so hard to eat it, that it wants to break nicely.
Yeah. So how do you hold it together then? Because the flaky, the not holding together is a good thing if you want something flaky. But then you have
Right.
what do you bind it with?
Ground flax. So we
Wow.
don't use any of the gums. They use ground flax, and so you baking it in a container in a bread pan, long loaf bread pans. So that holds it together. And when I originally started, I was hand slicing them, and then I moved to a deli meat slicer, but it would shred them. So I had to freeze the loaves and then I could slice them frozen. And if they were too frozen, they would curl and break during baking. If they weren't frozen enough, they would shred.
Yeah.
And now we have a slicer that they don't have to be frozen and it can slice them beautifully and put them right on the sheet pan and bake them. And we can go as thin as we need to. It's
Wow.
pretty amazing. I'm
Well,
amazed that
what's
they
the
can
difference? What
slice.
makes that slicer so much better? Is it a different type of system,
It's
or
a
is
different type of
it a
slicer. It's a
laser
bandsaw.
slicer?
Yeah,
It almost
well, the
sounds like,
deli
or a
meat.
water, like one of those water slicers, that shoots a thin jet stream or something like that, or is it just a
Yeah,
metal blade?
it's well, there are these, so they get sliced vertically, and these long lobes that are the width of a full-size sheet pan go into these chutes, and then it rocks back and forth, and there's a very fast blade. And it's the same kind of slicer that would, slice like prosciutto and things, so it can get that thin of a slice if you need it to. But the fact that they're gluten-free
Yeah.
and it's able to slice fast enough that it doesn't have time to think about falling apart or shredding.
So there's no waste with this new system, that you have very little waste or breakage.
Much less waste. Yeah. I mean, occasionally a loaf will flip and as it's getting smaller and goes sideways and do things like that. But for the most part, it's a big improvement. We have a lot more consistency in the thickness, which makes the baking process then much better. You don't have, thick pieces or thick chunks. And
Well, it sounds like there was a kind of a learning curve in all this, and it took you a while to kind of ramp up to a formula and a recipe and a system that worked.
yeah,
How long did that take you? Because I want to talk about that, and then we're going to take a little break, and we'll come back and we'll do some tasting.
sure.
So
That took it. Yeah, I started in my home kitchen about a little over 6 years ago, and it definitely took about 3.5 years to figure it all out.
wow. Well, I met
And there
you
were many
about
times I was like, that's it, I'm done.
I met you about 5 or 6 years ago at the Maine Kneading Conference, the big bread
Yeah,
conference up there in
yeah.
Skowhegan, Maine, and that's where I first met you. And I think, did you have Chris there? Did I taste some Chris?
I
There?
did. I had the blueberry and cranberry there.
Were they kind of like prototypes, or were you already in business with them at that point?
I was selling them at the time, and I kind of tweaked them as I went. So I had a lot of friends and family that were my taste testers, but then I wanted to get them out in the market and get feedback and do in-store demos and things like that. And so they definitely evolved, and I probably noticed more of the changes than the customer, because I was always amazed if people didn't call me up and say, these aren't exactly the same as last,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
they weren't. I just kept tweaking them for the better and the better and the better.
So these were being marketed just locally then at first, like
Mhm.
sort of as a
Yep,
test marketing.
co-ops, local cheese shops. Co-ops were
Okay.
big supporters, just because I could go in and say, oh, we use local maple, we use local honey, you use the buckwheat, blueberries.
Well, and that's a whole category we need to talk about in our next segment, because there's one thing is being local and being embraced locally, and then but you're now in the process of now blowing that up and going nationally and turning this into a product that can be found anywhere.
Yeah.
My wife immediately asked me, can we go to Whole Foods and get some right now? And I said, our Whole Foods doesn't have them yet down here in North Carolina, but they're coming, and so
But
we want to talk about that in
We're
part
getting
too.
there.
Yeah. So, but I'm very excited about the whole process of kind of taking an idea, from the
Mhm.
idea stage, and then turning it into a product. People ask all the time. Everyone has different products and ideas for things, and they don't know really even how to get started or where to go. The farmers markets have opened up some opportunities for some people, but maybe 1 out of every 100 product that shows up at a farmers market will eventually go bigger than just local farmers markets, but it happens. And that's the dream that a lot
Yeah.
of entrepreneurs have. So let's
Yeah.
explore that when we come back.
Okay.
We're going to take a little break right now and come back with Karen Getz and talk more about the evolution of Maine crisp. I'm going to hold up a couple different boxes. Here's the savory fig and thyme. And I've got, of course, the wild blueberry and walnut, which is like the flagship product. What were the first two?
The cranberry almond.
And the cranberry almond, which I've got right
the-
here, the cranberry
Yep.
almond, yeah.
And the wild blueberry walnut.
The wild blueberry one, and then the cinnamon maple is one I
And
have
the
also.
cinnamon maple came along, yeah.
Yeah,
And
so
Savory
there's,
Fig and Thyme is our latest version.
so we'll talk about what are maybe some new products in the horizon and all this, but I really want to get into, how you grew this company and where you see taking it. Okay, so we'll be back in part 2 with Karen Getz. You're on Pizza Talk with Peter Reinhardt, Karen Getz, and we'll see you in part 2. Welcome back to Pizza Talk. We're here with Karen Getz, the founder and creator of Maine Crisp, various flavors. We're going to talk about those flavors in a second. You're coming to us from northern Maine, right? You're still up in the northern outreaches of Maine. Are you also, in addition to being an entrepreneur with this business, are you also a buckwheat farmer? Do you grow any, or do you work with local farmers?
Nope, we just work with the local farmers.
There's only so many things you can handle. Farming and running a business are two different things. But you know that from being a cheesemaker as well. Of course, I should have realized when you said you were making cheese that you must be living in Vermont when you were doing that, because that's Vermont and cheese go together, just like blueberries in Maine go together. And now forever from this point forward, it will be buckwheat in Maine. And we touched on this in our first segment, but Maine isn't the only place where buckwheat grows, but it sounds like because it is a cold weather crop that it does well there. But where else is buckwheat growing in the United States?
In the Midwest mostly that I've seen.
It's not a southerly kind of grain. It's not something you'd see in the warmer regions. Then is it too not genetic?
Yeah, there's a mill in the Midwest. I think they're in maybe North or South Dakota. Might be where they're at. There's some growers in New York State as well.
When is it usually harvested? Is it like a spring harvest or a summer harvest or what?
It is in early summer harvest.
So it goes to probably get winter's over. Is it an annual or perennial? Do they have to replant every year, or does it just keep popping back?
Good question. I
All
think they have to replant every year. Yeah.
Buckwheat, maven, which I think when you get, because since we're going to be talking about growing this company, when you get out there and you're all over the country, introducing these crisps and buckwheat to a lot of Americans who don't get it and don't know about it, they're going to want to know everything there is to know about buckwheat. And because I think I'm fairly typical to a lot of consumers, and I know that I want to know. I think it's fascinating that we've grown up and buckwheat's always been just sort of a little tangent in our lives. If you happen to eat, kasha and bow ties, or eat blinis and things like that, but it's not the grain that Americans sort of identify with the way that we do with wheat or even with corn or rice, and yet it has the potential to be that important and that big. So let's go back to the story. So you're growing the company. You came out with a couple flavors. You figured out a system for making the small loaves and slicing them so that kind of just like biscotti, it's really just a variation of biscotti in a way. Or you could say that biscotti is a variation of Melba toast, and Melba toast, they're just a rebaked bread that turns into a cracker. And these are like really great crackers. What you talked about earlier, wanting to serve cheese with fruit. Well, you've got fruit in here and nuts in here as well. But what are some of the things that you're finding from your customers that they like to, put with these crackers?
Oh goodness, they love like the wild blueberry walnut with chev, and that is
cheese,
with fresh chev. That's
while you're saying this, I'm holding up a slice of the cranberry almond, the cranberry almond crisp. Yeah, and I love the way these thin slices of almond are they sliced that way by the slicer, or do you put in almond slices, when you put the loaves
They
together.
are sliced that way by the slicer. So all the seeds and the nuts are whole when they go
Wow.
in.
Yeah, because that is a great slicer you got that it can.
Yeah.
And
We
you
go
don't
through a
even have,
lot of blades. It's really
you
a
don't have to
blade
freeze
company.
it. Don't even have to freeze the loaves to do that. Huh?
No, no, we don't. And the idea was to create something that, had enough flavor that you would want to just snack on them on their own, but also complement cheese and not overwhelm cheese. And then hold up to cheese. So, sometimes, especially with the gluten-free, they could tend to get a little pasty
Yeah.
in chewing. And, that kind of doesn't complement the cheese quite as well. And these stay nice and crunchy, and so they can be out for a while, where and with cheese on them and serve them, and they still hold up and are
And the
crunchy.
crisps have such a pleasant flavor, but also a pleasant aftertaste.
Mhm.
It's not bitter or anything. And they're sweet, a little slightly sweet, but the only sweetener I see on the label is maple syrup. Is that your primary sweetener?
No, we do. So it's a combination. So let's see, the cranberry and the wild blueberry both have honey and
Okay.
organic brown sugar. And the cinnamon has organic maple and organic brown sugar, and the savory fig and thyme just has organic maple.
So it depends on which flavor you try to match the sweetener to but it's just
Exactly.
it's a very light touch with the sweetener. It's not like this overwhelmingly sweet cracker, but it is
Right.
something that you kind of, last night, when I gave the first ones to my wife, I had to kind of take the box back from her because she would eat the entire box. By the end of the night, I just gave some samples to my office sweet mate over here, Melinda,
Uh-huh.
who her office is right across the hall from me, and she always gets to be the first one to test samples of things that come in here. And same thing, she was saying, "Wait, you can just eat these, just the whole box if you."
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
I have people that let me know, like, they're like, oh, I just have them with tea. Like I'll have like 3 or 4 a night, or with a glass of wine. And it's just something that they'll turn to instead of a cookie, because
yeah,
they have enough sweet that they satisfy that craving.
and
Uh,
I was
but we
just having
don't
some
add
with
any
coffee.
oils and, nothing. And so there's something they can feel good about eating.
I was just dipping it in my coffee.
Yeah.
It's a dipper, it's great. And of course, that's what we do with biscotti. It's the same thing.
Yeah.
Anything you can
Oh,
do
I'm
with
a big
biscotti, you
dipper.
can do with this. So you've been out in the marketplace for a few years.
Hmm.
How far have you expanded the breadth of your reach, and how many products are these for the only ones on the mix right now?
Yeah, so far it is these four. I have 2 other flavors under development, and they will also be so our savory fig and thyme. So what I have learned that a fair number of people that have celiac disease also cannot have dairy,
Ah,
and as people age, they also have a certain percentage of the population becomes lactose intolerant. So in the first 3 flavors, I use the organic non-fat milk powder, and that helps with the texture. So it's sort of a softer texture. They're really awful without it. And so it was a bit of a challenge to make one that has no dairy in it and is completely plant-based.
interesting. And that'll again be able to reach wide. It will also be vegan friendly
Yeah,
without honey and no animal products. It also that
yeah,
again opens up another segment
yeah.
that hasn't been able to partake up till now.
Yeah, and the
Um,
sales for that have taken off. So we are in, in New England, we're in Hannaford supermarkets, we're in Whole Foods, the North Atlantic region. We've started shipping to the Midwest, to KeHE in their distribution center outside of Chicago. So we're starting to populate in Indiana and Ohio, and another warehouse is opening up in York, Pennsylvania. We have one in Northeast Maryland. So we're seeing more New Jersey, Virginia, DC, West Virginia. And yeah, so we're
Well, it
making
sounds like
progress.
it's getting a little bit lower and
It's getting
closer and
there,
closer
yeah.
to North Carolina. You kind of have the northeast quadrant, is
Yeah,
covered to some
pretty
extent.
well covered,
So what
right?
happens when a company, like, we'll use Whole Foods as an example, since this seems like such a perfect Whole Foods product.
Mhm.
They say to you, okay, we're doing really well in New England. We want to offer it to all of our affiliates around the country. Can you produce that much product? Is there enough buckwheat to go around, and is there enough capacity in your baking operation to expand, or is it going to have to be sort of little inch by inch?
It will have to be foot by foot. We have some space to expand, but one of our lead investors has purchased a building here in the next town over, and that is under construction for a much larger facility.
Fantastic.
Then we'll be able to expand. But Whole Foods is great about not overwhelming you. Like, you could have started with just one store if you wanted to, but we had enough capacity that we could do the North Atlantic region. And they don't want out of stock. Stores don't want out of stock. So we definitely, are cautious on how many distribution centers we open up so that, we can meet that need now.
Yes.
We can only make so much product out of our current facility. But by spring of next year, we'll be in the new facility, and it'll be that, once again, lots of space to grow.
Well, that'll give you not just doubling your capacity, you could even go beyond doubling.
Right, we're going from 2,500 square feet of manufacturing space. We have 3,000 square feet of a separate facility that's our warehouse for shipping and packaging supplies and stuff that are there. So we'll be under one roof at 17,000 square feet.
Do you find that once you get out beyond the Maine region and circle, that the influence of being a Maine product changes in any way? Does the customer still embrace that idea, or is it too much now? No, that's a Maine thing. That's not an Ohio thing or a Michigan thing.
I think we have found from customers that have, sent us email messages or said something on, social media, that so many of our customers have some sort of connection to Maine, no matter where they are in the United States. So they either grew up in Maine, they vacation in Maine, they remember visiting grandparents and summering in Maine. So I'm amazed at the number of people that do have that connection to Maine, and they look at that. And it was very similar to living in Vermont, of like, just the idea of something coming from Maine to them represents something better for you and healthy.
Exactly. That's what I was going to say. Maine is a brand. It's not just a
Maine
state.
is a brand. Yep.
And it seems like, so are there like associations in Maine like that help to market the Maine brand?
For sure, you've got the tourism. We just attended on Sunday the Maine annual cheese festival, which was amazing. And so, yeah.
Did you provide crackers to Chris for that?
We did. So they sold out. They were, I think, like 1,200. They did it in two separate groups, but we had donated some crisps for this little cheese box that they gave everybody that came. And what was great was we had lines at our stand, and we sold so many crisps that day. And, it just reinforces what we're doing. It energizes me to keep going, because you have people with celiac disease, people that just love them for something to snack on, and just thank you for making something that they can eat and they can enjoy and that they feel really good about.
Well, this is a 4-ounce box of crisps. Which I imagine started out as at least a 16 or 24-ounce loaf of bread before it's down to this. So there's, people say it's only 4 ounces, but we know that there was a lot of more product before you dried it and dehydrated it. But what is a typical at the retail level? What would a customer expect to pay for one of these 4-ounce boxes of crisps?
Sure, most places are $6.99 to $7.99.
So it's a pretty good price point from the seller's standpoint. And I think crackers as a category, I'm kind of keen. People ask me, would I ever want to get back into the game? And I said, if I were going to get back into the baking game, it would be in crackers, because I think crackers is a great category, although it's now heavily saturated with some great products. But it seems like, number one, you can get a lot of product in a box, because it's dry, for and get seems like a good price point, for you, price margin. Where do you see, so first of all, it's only in the states that you mentioned. What's the long-term plan? Do you have sort of an ideal scenario of how long it will take you to kind of cover the rest of the country with this product?
Yeah, I think once we start up our new facility, we'll have the proper ovens. Right now, we have individual convection ovens, and
Uh-huh.
they're loading and unloading.
So
So we
you're
have
still doing it in the entrepreneurial fashion, but
exactly,
you're about
exactly.
to
And we
break
tweak
through
it.
to the
We
small.
find ways we worked with a manufacturing specialist who helped us to, with the workspace and workflow so that, we didn't have employees wandering around too much, walking too much, and what's the better flow. We got input from them as well as like, we had different drawings to see. But I think, once that new facility opens, it's our new production facility that the sky is the limit. Because we'll be able to make so much more product.
Yeah.
We've already, been talking with the Bouchards about, how much they can grow and mill, but they're open to having other growers grow, and they'll do the milling for them to keep, us in a good supply of buckwheat. And
So
then
you're
I've been
currently getting
experimenting with
all your
other.
buckwheats coming from one farm, from the Bouchard
It is
farm?
all coming from one farm, which is a little scary, but
Yeah,
I
yeah.
have experimented with other buckwheat that, okay, I know I could get this buckwheat or that buckwheat and use if we needed to.
And but are there other farms growing the Tartary buckwheat, or did Bouchards kind of have a corner on that one?
They pretty much have the corner market. There is a farm in New York that is growing the Tartary buckwheat, and we go with the Bouchards because they're all are also certified gluten free.
Ah, sweet.
So, somewhere like Maine Grains, which I, love, we can't use their buckwheat because they mill all their wheat and spelt
Yeah,
and
because
stuff.
it's in the same facility as wheat.
Right,
So,
right.
so this allows you to continue to make this totally gluten-free product for people.
Totally gluten free, and we should very soon have our gluten free certification. But we, do in-house testing, outsource lab testing, and to ensure that the product, meets our guidelines.
I'm going to take a bite of another one. I've even tasted this one. I'm going to hold up for you the cinnamon with cinnamon maple. And I see there's little specks. Those look like, are they sesame seeds that are?
Those are sesame seeds, and they have organic Zante currants in them.
Mm.
And my favorite way to eat those is use them as an edible spoon and dip them in vanilla ice cream or gelato,
Oh, oh,
or slather them with salty butter.
salty butter.
Super
Mm.
good.
I like that ice cream idea. I'm gonna save bring some of
Yeah.
these home, get some gelato. But they're different because this has the cinnamon. It's a little
Mhm.
bit more desserty.
A little
And
more desserty. That's our sweetest one, and we refer to it as dessert crisp. I mean, Chev goes nicely with that because the contrast of some of the tartness of a Chev, like a lemon Chev even, is really nice. Triple creme cheese.
and I love cinnamon. I think cinnamon again is one of those. It's a spice that everyone loves in flavor, but I think more and more it has a cachet of wellness about it too,
Yeah,
because we know
yeah,
that it also helps to lower cholesterol and all sorts of other things. So
yeah.
people are starting to load up on cinnamon.
Right, 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 and put it in a lot of stuff.
The
And it's
students
it's
here.
it's our slowest seller of our 4 flavors, but like at the cheese festival, it was one of our best sellers. So it's one of those flavors that I don't know if people overlook it a little bit because, oh, it's cinnamon maple. I've had lots of cinnamon maple things, but when they taste it, they're like, oh, these are nice.
Yeah,
We use
exactly.
a lot of cinnamon.
Not quite a cookie, but still a cracker. But
Right.
but yet that gives that little sweet aftertaste. Here at Johnson and Wales, there's a big culinary, college within our school here, and the students, some upperclassmen will sometimes, I would say, taunt the freshmen and challenge them to eat a teaspoonful of cinnamon.
Oh.
It's an old, serious, dangerous game. But they say, I'll give you $20 if you can take down a whole teaspoon of cinnamon. And everyone thinks, oh, I love cinnamon, and then they take it and
Right.
your throat closes up and you can't swallow it. It's just too much. But
Yeah.
so I usually actually in my first classes, I always warn people, do not fall for the cinnamon. But yeah, you can't go wrong with a nice cinnamon flavored cracker. Now this one is the other side of the coin. It's the savory fig and thyme. So this is one of the only ones, I think the only one that really has a strong hint of herb and especially being thyme and rosemary. Those are pretty potent. So
Mhm.
this one also has, it looks like, what is it? Is a walnut in here? Yeah, it looks
So
like
there is whole walnuts and walnut meal, as well as um, hemp.
hemp.
Mhm.
And of course, the fig is on the
Hemp
box.
seed.
It's,
And then diced figs are in it
and
as
and
well.
I love fresh figs. So you could sort of could say you had me at figs.
Yeah.
But so is it of the four, which is the top seller? Is there one that's a top seller?
Cranberry almond has been the top seller, but savory fig and thyme is coming up close,
This
and
one's the
they're
savory
really
thyme.
like within a few percentage points of each other. The wild blueberry, the savory fig, and the cranberry almond.
I would think that the savory, thyme and fig would be a really good one with cheeses, with harder
Yeah,
cheeses and
yeah,
things.
yeah. It was one of our shops, De Bruno Brothers in Philadelphia. The buyer there said, "Please make one with fig. It will sell so well."
Really?
Mhm.
Oh, that's interesting. Now I've got this. I'm going to pull out the blueberry one, which I've been eating it silently when you were talking. And I don't know about silently, but and of course you can see the little wild blueberries in there.
Mhm.
Do you use dried? You have to use dried blueberries, I
I
would think.
use dried blueberries. Yep, you have to use dried and wild blueberries. I said because they've been growing here for 10,000 years. They also have twice the antioxidants as cultivated, your bigger blueberries.
And from a flavor profile standpoint, this one really comes in between the two that we just tasted. It's not
Yeah.
as sweet as the cinnamon. It doesn't have that savory
Hmm.
after of the fig, and but it's kind of it's mild and very pleasant, and just a hint of blueberry. The blueberry, because it is dried, you don't really get the blueberry until you've been chewing on it for a little bit and you rehydrate it in your mouth. But then all of a sudden
Right,
you go,
right.
oh, there, you kind of go, there's the blueberry. I was wondering where it went to. I
Uh-huh.
love it. And then the final one is this one is the one you said, the cranberry almond, which is one of your big sellers.
Hmm.
And let me see if you can see. You can see, of course, the cranberry. Again, we associate cranberry, I think, with both New England, and also the Midwest, Upper Midwest, Michigan area, and
Right,
stuff like
right.
that. And it's clearly a superfruit. I think pardon me, I'm going to have a little swig of coffee because I've just got
Hmm.
a little cracker crumb going down here.
Right, right. You've got the sweet sort of chewiness of the cranberry. And then, I use a blend of herbs de Provence as the spice.
Herbs de Provence. So there's a little bit of herb in there.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
and
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 pumpkin seeds and sesame seeds and
so that's that hint of lavender that
almonds.
I'm getting is from the herbs de Provence. And there's a
Mhm.
little lavender aftertaste.
Yes.
And I love the
Yep.
look of it. Of course, it really it evokes the whole idea of biscotti with the
Yep.
slices of almond and things like that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, so, and so these are the four that are out there for those who are in a place where they can buy them. And then they should be on the lookout for at least two more flavors coming soon. Would you say?
Probably, definitely one of the flavors. We get a lot of requests for just a simple plain crisp, and that's been a challenge for me because I'm a baker who's like, oh, I got this, that can go in. Oh, I got this, and my family, they'll be like, oh, these cookies you made are great, but they won't be exactly the same the next time because that's just me. So it's been really hard to like make something and be consistent. So when I'm experimenting, I've had to ratchet it back for a plain one, but I think it will be nice. When I think they're, ready for sampling out, I'll send you some and get some feedback. And then, but I think we'll have probably late October, we might be able to introduce at
That's
least
very
one of the two new flavors.
great, great.
Yeah.
Because obviously this growth and from working with companies over the years who do products,
Mhm.
and sell at places like the Fancy Food Show, and that's where they
Yeah.
build their accounts. The one thing that they've told me, and this goes from everyone from Rick Bayless to Amy's Kitchen to all the different
Mhm.
companies that I know, that every time you come to one of these shows, you have to come with new product. The
Yeah.
the brokers are constantly on you. You can't stand pat with just the ones you have. You always have to be coming out with new. And if it means taking some out of circulation and adding to it,
Right.
they always want something new because that's the American mindset.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. And they want it
but
now.
yeah, and they want it, yeah. So most companies now, when they get to a certain size, they have to be thinking 1 to 2 years ahead. So they're developing products now that they don't even plan to introduce for another year or two.
Mhm.
And I think that's, you're kind of moving into that area, that territory. Um,
Yeah.
but I love the fact that you're taking it slow and organically, and not forcing the issue, because there's certain constraints, one of which is how much production can you actually do. And then you
Right.
have production pretty soon. So then you go, okay, I can make this much, but how much can I actually sell? And
Right. Right.
and that's the
Right.
game, is that,
Right. And you want to keep the quality there. Like that's really important. So early on, one of the thoughts, this was 2 years ago, was what if we, still made product here in Maine for the East Coast, but we had somebody co-pack for us. And so we started experimenting with a co-packer in Colorado. And I had no experience with baking at high altitude. And that was eye-opening. And it was so dry that the sliced crisps were drying on the trays
yes,
before they could get into the oven.
wow.
But they had that yellow color, so they all looked like these jaundiced crisps.
Oh my goodness. So
And it was close to a disaster,
it
but
wasn't
we
working.
realized that
But were
no,
they using
we need to
your
control it.
Tartary buckwheat? Were you sending the buckwheat to them?
Yes,
Or were
we
they
sent it.
regional buckwheat?
Right. And we just sent it just to, these were tests to see like, could someone else make it like that?
Yeah, yeah,
Could we, would it be the quality that we wanted to? And
yeah.
it was not. They were like a completely different product. They didn't look as good. They didn't taste as good. And, some of that was like, making
You
the
couldn't
tweak.
put it in this box, in your box. It wouldn't be brand congruent.
It would have gone in our box, yeah, but we pulled the plug on it and said, nope, we need to own our own production completely and the quality of it, and
Yeah.
not be follow through on the promise. Like that's
Yeah.
what I always say. Like, okay, so we've got a box that shows like this tasty product. It better be tasty on the inside too.
Exactly.
I hate
I'll
when
tell
we
you,
just
I
buy a
think nothing
box.
pisses off a consumer more than to buy something that looks good and then get it and it doesn't look anything like what you thought you were getting.
Exactly, and it's so disappointing. So
Yeah.
So that was what we realized at that point of like, nope, we need to control it and the process.
Well, a couple more questions before we run out of time. And one is, okay, have you tried, you mentioned that all these different types of buckwheat that exist. Have you
Mhm.
tried making these crisps with these other styles of buckwheat? And could that possibly be an extension, a line that's, using Japanese buckwheat or some of the other types of buckwheat to make a
Yeah.
similar but yet different product?
Yes,
It
I
works.
have. Because part of doing that was to make sure that, having one supplier who has 5 years worth of buckwheat, in storage, but still making sure that I could use more readily available buckwheat and achieve the same results.
Right, right. Because it seems like, as you said, you've got a very specific story to tell. You're selling a product, but also a story and a
Mhm.
brand, the main brand, everything else. And part of it is that you're using a very specific buckwheat from a farm, from one farm right now, which is a
Right,
big thing in
right.
itself. Um, uh, but yet you have opportunity to make other buckwheat type products, and in fact,
Correct.
products that aren't even crisps. Anything that you could own the buckwheat brand, you
Oh
could own
yeah,
buckwheat.
yeah. And I've been playing around with different things that and using different levels of buckwheat or combining with almond flour and they're nice.
What
That's
is
all
like
I'll
buckwheat
say.
granola and things like that. I mean, there's no end, and that's really, the
Yeah.
opportunities that await you. So it's got to be very exciting for you. And so let me end with this question, and that is, you've taken an idea from
Mhm.
start to finish. You've grown it, gradually, slowly, learning curves, mistakes, all the usual things that all entrepreneurs have. What advice would you give to someone who's watching this, who also has an idea for a product different from yours, but a product that they believe in the way you do? How any tips on how they can grow that into a business?
Yeah, I mean, you've got to start with start small, and if you live in a state that you can certify your kitchen and start in a home kitchen, that's a big help. When I first moved into commercial space, I still didn't have enough crisp crisp customers to pay for that space. So I started doing other baking on the side and sold baked goods and coffee
Uh-huh.
to fund the crisp company. And then once we got to a point of, enough we could no longer keep baking other things, transitioning. So it's sort of being open to, other ideas and other paths. It may not be quite straight to get there, but you
Yeah,
will get there if
you
you
do what
if
you need
you're
to.
at it.
Well, did you create a business plan that you followed, or were you just kind of winging it and going by gut and instinct?
Yeah, I mean, I started without a business plan and then created it after a year, thinking, you know what, I better, I think you have a little more flexibility when you're a home kitchen and you don't
Yeah,
have, extra utilities and things like that and rent to pay. But, you
right.
know, starting to look at it seriously, and also it led to like the way this product is made. You have twice the labor in it with the double baking, the quality of the ingredients, the hand packing. I knew early on, it was like it took me 8 hours to make 2 cases, which was 24 bags of crisp
Wow.
a day.
Yeah.
And
You're going, how
it
can I turn
was
that into a business?
it wasn't a business. It was a time consuming hobby that I was
Yeah.
exhausted from. When I would get an order for, 12 cases in a week, I was overwhelmed.
And yet,
So, it's like, so I knew that I had to, keep digging, keep finding. There's so many resources on the internet. And if your state has resources, tap into those. Even when it was just me making them, I still used that manufacturing consultant to help me, like, where can I do, what else can I do? And, he helped with packaging and how can we make this more efficient so that, I can get more product out the door. But, don't give up. Don't stop asking questions. No question is ever too silly. And, reach out to people that are in the business. Many of them are happy to share information and stories of, how they got started. Or, I had people that were helpful in sourcing early on, or sharing the buying of a pallet of something. And I only might have needed 100 pounds, but, we have a great group of, small specialty food producers
how
in
did you
this.
find investors to help you grow?
We were fortunate because we had our one investor came on board. Who was a friend that we had known for many years. And so he came on board. He had a background in distribution, ran potato chip distribution business and sold it to Wise. And so that was a game changer for us
Yeah.
because we really needed, and then my husband came on board as well. And that was sort of okay, between the three of us, we're going to take this business and grow it. He's, helped to source other capital from, other investors and outside investors, but, it takes a lot and
Yeah.
to get to that point. And, you tend to be too small for venture capital and you're sort of in that friend and family and, it's not without challenges, but, it's so rewarding. It really is.
Yeah.
To see it on the store shelves. I'm like this proud mama. Like, oh, there they are.
Exactly. And those are the moments that fuel the dream when it gets
They
hard,
do.
because as you probably can attest, starting a business is it's not for wimps. It's hard work,
Yeah.
fraught with peril and everything else, but resilience and the ability to sort of hang in there, as you said, and not give up your dream is so important. And
Right. Because if you believe, other people believe too. They pick up on your enthusiasm. They pick up on, what you're doing. Most people want to be helpful. And if you're doing a product that, we have fortunate in New England that we have so many food co-ops in New England. Those are just natural for new businesses to break into because they want to support local. It's part of their mission.
and when you have a dream that's strong and is starting to manifest, people want to invest in your dream.
Yeah.
I think, and want to go all along for the ride with you. I know I do. I you know, when I hear about how you're just going, I go, I'd love to go on that Maine sleigh ride right now, you know, because you got, you know, you're onto something. I think that when we have this next interview in a couple of years from now, we can look back and say, see, those were the good old days. But you know,
right.
So Karen, I really want to thank you for spending this time with us and sharing your dream and your vision and your great crisps. By the way, do you ever think about doing anise, like going Italian style and doing like something that's like a biscotti with an anise flavor? Has that ever been on your radar?
It has.
All right. So I'm redundant. You don't need my ideas. It just struck me is that this is so much like a biscotti. Why not, you know, like ride on?
Yep.
Well, you got Armando broth, as we would, you know, get from just a few miles east of Italy. So I'm going to continue to look for. I'm going to be looking for these products. Please let me know as soon as your distribution can get them down here in the Carolinas, so that we can run out and get them, you know, anytime. And how can people reach you? What's the website if they want to?
The website is mainecrisp.com.
Maine Crisp with it, no S at the end. mainecrisp.com. Yeah. All right, mainecrisp.com. You can find out all you need to know from Karen. You can write to her via that, probably through the website as well.
Through the website. We also sell and ship all over the US as well.
So you also have an internet mail order. Oh, well, there you go. So I don't have to wait till it comes down here. I can order.
Not necessarily, no.
Fantastic. Well, congratulations. You know, I'm very excited to hear about the various new milestones that you reach, you know, in the journey to ultimately be the buckwheat brand, the buckwheat. I'm going to say own that corner of the marketplace. You're going to be Mrs. Buckwheat. And thanks so much, Karen. Congrats.
Thank you, Peter. Appreciate it.
All of you for joining us on Pizza Talk today with Karen Getz of Maine Crisp. See you all next time.